Hello and welcome to the Coaching Podcast, Coaching for Success in Sport and Business. Your host is Emma Doyle, the energy and high performance under pressure coach who is a world leader in unleashing human potential. Buckle up for this high octane session. Let them have it, coach.
G'day, everybody, and welcome to the Coaching Podcast. I have the pleasure today to interview Lindsey Wilson. Don't you even love that you have Wilson as a surname? Tennis, Wilson. I'm sponsored by Wilson. Shout out to Wilson. I really appreciate their rackets and as a company. And this is even a Wilson top that looks kind of cool. Anyway, it's not about me, Lindsey. It's about you. Look, first of all, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Yeah, I get the Wilson tennis ball. I also get the Wilson volleyball from Castaway. So no relation, but it is great.
What about, have you seen my fortune cookie? My Ted Lasso is a Wilson fortune cookie. There we go. Motivational quotes in there. Anyway, cool. we digress already. So back on track. For those of you who don't know Lindsey Wilson, she's a mindset and mental performance coach, sports hypnotist. I'm NLP trained myself, so I can't wait to take a deeper dive into that. But basically, she's got a professional basketball career spanning close to a decade. And I love that she's the founder of Positive Performance and the Mindset Coach Academy. She's also a podcast host. So I look forward to being on her show as well. And the one thing I like that you have is Mental Mondays. That in itself is just a great catchy line. So my first pattern break question I'm going to ask you is, talk to me about Mondays and people with the Monday slump, right? So I want to know, what's the first thing that you do on a Monday morning?
Well, ideally, and this doesn't happen very often, I'm planning my Monday before Monday. But I would say in an ideal world, that I'm doing that on Thursday or Friday, whatever my last day of work is, or at the very latest on Sunday. A lot of the things that I think I should be doing, I don't always do. When it comes to having the chaos of my weekends, I don't work. I have kids. And so I often come back on Monday mornings, and I do have that oh wait, I have to screw my brain on real quick, before I will sit down at my desk and I'll be like, I don't even know which way is up. But I do have a routine that I teach my students. We call it the Daily Mindset Beast. And it's really a routine that centers around, obviously, mindset, reviewing goals, reviewing affirmations. We do some visualization. I found writing, journaling, or typing it out, getting my thoughts out of my brain, and then very clear task-oriented planning. So, to take that to a next level, I'm time blocking, but I don't always do that. But I think the core of it is some sort of mindset work to get my brain where my feet are. And transition into work from, soccer games and whatever else we were doing on the weekend. And when I do the tasks, I keep it really simple. I write a line down the paper. I put work on one side and life on the other. And I literally write down everything. We also do something called the 5 Ds, and I might forget one of them. But essentially, it's looking through all of them, deciding if you need to do it, delegating it if you can, deferring it to another time if it's not appropriate for right now. And essentially that whole exercise is prioritization. Really figuring out what is the most important thing, but literally putting everything down there, including things that are already done. I will put down, we get milk delivered. So I'll put that on, obviously on the life side, and it comes on Monday morning. I get a check. And don't you know that little dopamine hit is oh my God, I have one thing done off my to-do list. I know I'm not the only one that does this. But anyway, so I have it all done, because if it's not on paper, it's really hard for my brain to not get distracted, right? And then it's an hour into your workday and all you've done is checked Instagram and your email. And then it's just you don't get that momentum. You don't really feel good about how much you're getting done. And then then you get that anxiety, at least I do, of I have so much to do and so little time, and now I have less time than when I even started. But I do think from the mindset perspective is any kind of visualization, journaling, just taking a beat, breathing, because I think when you don't do that, you end up either working on the wrong thing or it's not really in line with like your goals, for example, which sounds like Captain Obvious, but it's really easy to let like your inbox or your coworkers throw things at you. And then like the most important thing gets or the most urgent thing in their mind gets prioritized. So that's what I would say. But I would also say that the times when you need to do that the most are the times when you feel like you don't have the time. And, you know, that's what they say about meditation, right? If you don't feel like you have an hour to meditate, you probably need to do it for 2 hours. I feel like that's the same thing with any kind of like morning routine. I find myself wanting to skip it on the days when I probably need it the most.
Oh, so true. So true. I love you've given about 10 tools, by the way. My listeners just notice in the first question that you've already got some practical strategies to put in place. And you know, time management. I mean, that those two words in itself makes me feel a bit unwell. But I want to ask you that question next around multitasking, right? Do you believe, I mean, you mentioned off air, you got 4 kids. Is it possible to actually multitask and actually do a good job? What are your thoughts?
You know, I think the research tells us that it's not possible. You're just task switching. But I also think that it's pretty unrealistic for us to not multitask at all. And I think that there's just like, I have something called the 20-minute drill. You know, it's kind of like the 2-minute drill from football. And it's like, it's all the little minutia tasks that you need to do that you probably don't want to do, that you can really batch them together, like calling the dentist and doing the permission slip for your kids things. And like, those are the things that really can cause a lot of anxiety and they can be a huge time suck. But if you batch them together, you really can. And that's the time that I think multitasking really works. You're checking your bank statement here and you're doing, and again, the research is going to tell us that you can't do that, but I find it unrealistic to not. But I do think that that idea of multitasking throughout the entire day is really detrimental. Like for me, when I'm at my best, and again, I don't practice what I preach all the time, but I have my little Pomodoro technique and I have my 20-minute task, or maybe even longer, depending on what I'm working on. And I have my timer and I try to work on that one thing that entire time. And that is the most efficient way to get things done. But I do think multitasking has its place. And I would also say, like, there's certain things that I do that really don't require like my entire brain. You know, like I'm definitely going to listen to your podcast and empty the dishwasher. And I'm probably going to be doing 5 other things at the same time. And like, I don't know, I'm a woman with 4 kids. I can do it. Like I know some people cannot, you know, they can't focus. Yeah. And for me, I can. But again, the research is going to say that we can't, but I think there's certain tasks that it makes sense.
I agree with you on a lot of those things. I love the 20-minute like batching. That's super cool. So what about when now you're about to coach somebody or a group of people? How can you bring yourself, let's say you've been doing your batching or your tasking, and you've got to be able to get yourself centered to be able to deliver a great coaching session. How can people get their mindset in the right gear to deliver?
One of the tools that we teach that's very transferable to athletics or speaking or coaching is called the Braver technique. And I developed it working with at the time it was a lot of college teams. And the coaches were telling me, like, how do I get my athletes focused for practice? You know, we have, at least in the US, it's like all about the dynamic warm up, and it's like the bands, and it's like, you know, everybody has paid so much attention to the physical warm up for good reason, right? I mean, people get injured if they don't take that time. And yet they weren't mentally there necessarily. And so basically what we developed was trying to take like all of these tools that we're taught are important from a mental game standpoint, but how do you actually do it in a concise, efficient manner? And we came up with an acronym called the Braver. And it's breathing, it's releasing. So you're going to be breathing in, releasing out, and then you're going to do that 5 times. And at the top of that, you're going to say your reset word, which is the last R. And then you're going to say an affirmation. and then you're going to visualize. So essentially it's breathing in, saying your reset word, breathing out. You do that 5 times, you say your affirmation, and then you visualize. And that is applicable. That's part of my morning routine. So any of my coaches learn that in any of my programs. Anytime I'm going to work with a team, a sports team, they're going to learn that for pre-practice and pre-game. And it's one of those things that's like really simple to do. It takes a little time maybe to set it up because you want to have a good affirmation, you want to have a good reset word. But once that's done, it's a tool that you can use at any time. And the cool thing, speaking of time management or coaching or whatever, like, as you mentioned, to get your mind right, meaning you're in a confident place. We call it a high vibe state where you're feeling good about yourself. Visualization is one of the most powerful ways to get yourself there, as is positive self-talk, which is what the affirmation is, like managing your thoughts. I was just talking to one of my coaches yesterday, and she was going into she's in our certification, and she was going in to work with a cross-country team. And I think it was her first presentation. So she was a little bit nervous. And we were talking about like watching your thoughts. Like, what is she going in to the presentation thinking? And one of the things we were, she was going to put it into her own words, but talking about basically what I was saying is the kids you're going in to talk to know nothing. Like literally, they're in high school, they know nothing about how the brain works. So if you teach them one thing, that is going to be one more thing than they've ever learned before. I think a lot of times people going into coaching, whether that's sports coaching or what we do coaching, is like they have such high expectations because they're so passionate about what they're teaching, which is good. But when we have too high expectations, it puts a lot of pressure on us as coaches, and it's not necessary. We don't need to fix anybody. We don't need to give them 20 tools. We need to give them one. Or maybe even plant a seed. We need to have the light bulb go off for one of them, and then it's worth our time. The counterintuitive way to go into those things is lowering your expectations, because otherwise I think it gets really overwhelming.
Well, it feeds beautifully into taking one step, doesn't it? Like, make that first step really simple to take, and you're more likely to take it. And absolutely. I know you're right before my TEDx talk, the only thing I said to myself was breathe in confidence, breathe out doubt.
Yeah, simple.
Just kept something that simple to be able to execute and deliver. All right, so let's go back to your basketball playing days, and I want to talk about belief work. I want to talk about whether you believed in yourself as an athlete. I know that you think it's one of the most underrated skills and can have a huge impact on motivation. So talk to me about when you were a player, about belief, and then did that evolve over time for you?
I had really big goals for myself as a basketball player when I was, probably 12 to 15. But I didn't have the mental skills. I didn't know how to work on it. I didn't know what I was supposed to do. I was very much a thinker. So I was just like trying to like solve it in my own brain, which was getting me nowhere. In fact, it was probably hurting me. And I got exposed to a mental performance coach, and he taught me very simple things, as you mentioned, like that we can train our brain, that, you can talk to yourself in a nice way, and, that's going to actually work better than just beating yourself up. And really what he taught me was I can train my brain, I can steer my thoughts. And that was just like a huge pivotal moment in my life. I went on to play collegiately and professionally, and literally the entire time I just looked around and I was like, what? And, I graduated from college in 2003. So it was a little while ago, but it wasn't that long ago where there just wasn't mental performance training. Like there just wasn't. Nobody was talking about it. Everybody knew like mental toughness was important, but nobody knew what that actually meant. And so we were all just kind of trying to figure it out. And I just saw a lot of my teammates really falling through the cracks. And anyway, so I started teaching these tools in a really simple way. I talked about visualization, positive self-talk. And as I really evolved in my career, I recognized this sort of thread through all of it, that sort of within that sort of mental toughness conversation that really nobody was talking about. And that was what separates good athletes from great athletes, or really great athletes from even great athletes, is the ability to believe. And I would say that happens in 4 different stages. There's the belief of a goal that hasn't happened yet, right? You start dreaming, in other words, and you really have to believe that that goal is somehow possible for you to even set it. Now, it might be far off, but there's a part of you that believes. Then we go into the belief that you need when it takes longer than you think it's going to, which is pretty much true for every goal, right? And you have to slog through it. And you think about, I think about myself at 15, I wanted to play professional basketball. Well, that was 9 years away, 8 years away. And, you have to get up at 5:30 in the morning for a goal that's 5 years away. So there's that belief. You have to hold that tight. And then there's the belief, which is probably the hardest, which is believing when there's failure or an injury or some sort of big setback that really a lot of people crumble, because suddenly you're like, this thing's never going to work out. And you have some evidence that it's not going to work out, right? And so maintaining belief during that. And then finally, the thing that's most maybe significant or most obvious for athletes, but it's also applicable to non-athletes, is being able to believe under pressure. So, the Olympics just finished this summer. I'm sure you were glued to it just like I was. Like, the ability for athletes to believe in themselves when everyone around them is just as good physically and the whole world is watching. That takes work. And you won't hear the athletes necessarily talk about it being work in the sense of using the word work, but you will say that, like, the difference is this mental component. And I would say that belief work is very much a part of it. And the reason that we know that is because the brain is designed to not waste energy. And it's also designed to not do things that aren't going to work out, because it's going to cause us pain. And so we always have this natural resistance to expanding ourselves, expending our energy on things that aren't going to work out. We're just not designed to do that. And so to work on belief is basically telling your brain, like, it's okay to keep investing in this goal. It's okay. It's it might not work out, but we're going to keep going because we do believe that there is some reward at the end. And that being like a part of training is really what I talk about with my students and the coaches that I train, because it doesn't take a lot of time, but it really is significant. When you know how the brain works, it's pretty obvious that it's a big part of pursuing any goal.
I mean, you've touched on it already around how, even the science that supports what you just said has changed from mental toughness to mindset development. And, no longer can we, yes, we need to be physically fit and at the top of our game, but it's no longer just, work really hard and the mental toughness will come. So, I love that in relation to the 4 levels of belief, because it helps provide framework. And so many people quit, don't they, when they're just about to break through as well. That happens, I'm sure you've seen that as well, time and time again. So I'm going to ask you 2 questions. I know you like to talk about the one great thing that great coaches do more than good coaches. And my book, of course, What Makes a Great Coach, we always ask in 1 to a maximum of 3 words, what makes a great coach? So I was wondering if your answer to that question is it similar to the one great thing that you're going to reveal that amazing coaches do?
The thing that I think distinguishes really great coaches is their ability to practice what they preach. So, because I think it creates an alignment and a trust and the ability to really live what you're telling other people to do. I think that's just a thread that is like, from a leadership standpoint, I think that is so, so important. It just makes sense, right? That if someone is asking you to push yourself and to go hard and believe in yourself and work on your mindset and be mentally tough, that they're doing it too. You don't have to be in the same shape that they are. Like, I remember my college coach, he used to walk on the treadmill for like the amount of the game plus 2 overtimes. So a basketball game is 40 minutes, 2 overtimes is 2 more 5 minutes. So it was 50 minutes. And I remember thinking like, you know, he's kind of out of shape. Like he's not like running with us, but like the fact that he is pushing himself in his way, like that creates that like respect where you're like, okay, we're in it together. And you're not just sitting out. And I also remember like being overseas. I remember I was playing basketball and the doctor like sat me down and like, and this was all like lost in translation probably, but they were basically telling me to lose weight. And he was sitting there telling me to lose weight, which, you know, I mean, whatever. There's a lot of things wrong with that, but I wasn't even upset about them saying it. What like really got to me was he was sitting there telling me to lose weight while smoking a cigarette. Right. And it's so it's like, if we're all like dispensing advice around here on like what's healthy, like let's start with the cigarette. You know what I mean? It's like there's just a disconnect when coaches aren't practicing what they preach. And I also give the example of like a coach that is trying to get their athletes to calm down. I'm a basketball player, so they're coming into the timeout huddle and they're screaming about calming down. And you see that kind of all the time, not to say that coaches can't yell. It's not that extreme. It's just more like if you're wanting your athletes to have emotional regulation, if you're wanting them to be mentally tough, if you're wanting them to believe in themselves, if you're wanting them to push themselves and work on their mindset, you better be doing it too. Because if you don't, it might not make a difference in 1 year. It might not make a difference on a single day. But at some point, your athletes are going to know that you're full of BS.
I think it's really important as well. Practice what you preach and live your talk. You have to, I think, in this day and age, especially with the different generations as well. You know, I know when I was growing up, you just respected your coach, and these days respect is earned by this next generation. They do question more things and they do ask why. Mm-hmm. Let's just go totally off topic for a minute, back to you being a mum of 4 kids. Did you see the Instagram viral video the other day around, it was a young, you know, it was a millennial parent educating her baby boomer mum on the language we now use. So instead of like, don't fall when she's on the playground, you know, what other choices do you have?
Right.
It was kind of hilarious. Like, I highly recommend you check it out just because it was, you know, have we gone too far with our language, or do you think that that's totally on point and the way that a lot of coaches have to really address their language in terms of bringing out the best in the future generations of players?
In my opinion, so much of at least the parenting like information that I'm learning is so amazing because it's the way that we're taught now is validating like the emotional experience. And I think that that is such a beautiful thing because it's really talking about, for example, when you're relating it to sports, we're talking about fear. We're talking about nervousness. We're talking about what's going on in the body when we're having the fight or flight response. And there's no, like, we're trying to remove the judgment from that, the shame, that like, I'm not supposed to be feeling that. And when done right, you know, you end up with these kids that are like, I'm feeling really angry right now. I'm feeling really, really frustrated. And it's just like the language that they have. And like, I'm so in awe of teachers that are training this stuff. Like most of my kids in the public school and in their pre-K are learning like this, what do they call it? Social emotional learning. They have like these full curriculums. And it's just like, and then they're talking about consent and like, I'm all for it. Like, I think from a coaching standpoint, especially when you're talking about the college level, I think it's really challenging because, you know, there has to be standards, there has to be boundaries. And I think the balance is really challenging, especially if you've been coached in the old school way. But I do think that, and you have to get more buy-in and all those sorts of things. But I do think that it's moving in the right direction where kids are really learning about their own emotions. And I think there's a ton of upside to it.
Yeah, so do I. Because when we don't, it plays out unresourcefully. Like when you don't acknowledge the emotion or you don't talk about it and allow the feelings to rise, it will play out unresourcefully. I've seen it time and time again on the tennis court, off the tennis court, over my years of chapter 1 of my life. So, thank you for sharing that. All right, so let's get into some practical tools. What's your favorite tool in helping coaches? You can take that any direction you like. What's one that you really love to teach that sheds a bit of light on your academy?
I'm sure you've learned this or taught it to before. We teach a reset or mistake ritual. And I think that when teams and athletes really learn about managing their emotions through mistakes, I mean, I imagine tennis I know it's full of mistakes. I've played it a little bit, not a lot, but I know that there's...
You are coming second.
Yeah. So it's like there are so many opportunities really in all sports. Some of them are a little bit trickier than others for races, for example. But for the ones that have a lot of breaks, there are a ton of opportunities to reset for better or worse, right? And speaking of emotional management, one of the hardest parts of performing is, as you know, when you make a mistake. And especially when there's any kind of public, a one-on-one sport, an individual sport, there's even more. But even in a team sport, there's a lot of opportunity for you to embarrass yourself, essentially, right? I always tell the story of I was a professional basketball player and I was going in for a game-winning shot and I dribbled the ball off my foot. Like, there are opportunities for us to emotionally dysregulate really often. And those moments throughout the game are more important than larger swaths of time. Like these little bits where we have like this fork in the road where we can go off, like all the negative train, and you can just like go off and start telling yourself what a bad player you are and how embarrassed you are and how no one's ever going to want to recruit you to their school and how your coach is going to pull you out and your teammates don't trust you and whatever BS. That is so easy to do versus keeping yourself in, if not a positive mind state, at least a neutral mind state. And so what we teach is, again, and coaches have this too, right? There's a bad call. Their athlete makes a mistake. Their assistant coach screws up the substitutions. There's like a million opportunities for everybody. And by the way, we also have some coaches that are teaching it to parents because parents need some way to regulate themselves as well. So anyway, the ability to reset. And also, I'd also say there's also the flip side of that where we can get, I don't want to say too positive, but we can start celebrating and then we can get, too relaxed or what have you.
False positive.
Yeah, exactly. So the ability to reset in competition, everybody wants the golden nugget. Everybody says, well, what do I do when my athletes make a mistake? And it's sort of like trying to get in better shape in the middle of the game. Like that work happens off the court. And so creating some sort of reset ritual or mistake ritual as a team or with your coach or with your mental performance coach, and to have it and to practice it in games, practice it in competition, practice it when things are going well, practice it when they're not going well. And you'll see tennis players doing this. You'll see pitchers doing this. This is not a new concept, but it's amazing how many athletes just don't do it. And it's a really powerful way to, and it gets stronger the more you use it, the more you practice it. It becomes sort of like this anchor in those moments. So that's something that we teach a lot because there is such a small time investment to get it set up with a huge return on investment. Like it can be a really powerful tool for athletes to have because those moments matter and they're really easy to get flooded with emotion.
The other reason I love doing this podcast is, even though you said that, do you mind if you give a sports tool? I mean, that happens in the workplace all the time where
for sure. Yeah,
somebody,
for sure.
You need a reset, you need mine's always been my thumb, my index finger and my middle finger. And when they connect, I'm connecting my heart, my head and my gut.
Yeah, there you go.
To align. So it's a great anchor example. And I know, as a sports hypnotist and hypnotherapy and visualization as a practitioner and believer, and I've seen the results of that kind of stuff as well. And Anchor is a great example of that, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yep. All right. Final question. What disruptive idea do you have that will change the way that we coach in 2030?
I mean, I'm certainly not the only one, but I do think that making visualization a part of sports training is so Captain Obvious to me. Like, I'm in the, it's not, and people aren't necessarily doing it, right? Either because they don't know what they're doing, or they feel silly, or they don't like their voice, or, or it's a little uncomfortable, or they're not sure if they're doing it right. And, what we know about the brain, and in particular the subconscious brain, this from NLP, is like it really understands visuals and emotions. And so you can say something all day long as a coach to yourself, as a parent, and we have all had that experience where repetition doesn't work. Like, you can say it till you're blue in the face and it's not seeping in. And visualization is that communication with the subconscious. And it is so powerful. It's so simple. It's free. Anybody can do it. You can do it anywhere. So to me, that is, I think we're going to look back, and it's like we looked at weightlifting 40 years ago and wonder, like, why was no one doing it until Nebraska did it? Mm-hmm. That's the thing that I think is going to be the next thing.
Well, I know that you have a 4-month dual certification program and a free ebook. So we will put all the links in the show notes, but you can learn more at positiveperformancetraining.com. And I appreciate all the little quick tips, from batching your ideas, the braver technique, hitting the reset button with a high vibe, your 5 Ds, and of course the 4 different phases of belief. Without summarizing it any more than that, practice what you preach. Lindsey Wilson, thank you for being on the Coaching Podcast.
Thanks, Coach Em. I so appreciate your time.
All right. And everybody else, we really appreciate your visualization, your vision for the future. Get believing in yourself, and thanks for listening.
The Coaching Podcast is sponsored by Transition Coach for Athletes, a global coaching, mentoring, and U.S. college sporting scholarship placement service. The service helps athletes navigate the often challenging world of choosing your best college fit while maximizing sports performance. Visit www.transitioncoachforathletes.com. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a rating review on your podcast listening device. And don't forget to tell a fellow coach about the show. The ball is in your court to take action and enjoy your coaching.